This conference will now be recorded.
We decided it may be a time to turn things around and hear from the people that attend our meetings, to hear what's on your mind as we enter the new year. We put out some questions to consider. I guess if you look at the questions, they're kind of geared mostly towards looking at GreeningUSA as an organization, and what priorities we should focus on in the new year. Suggestions for the 12 traits, additions, changes, green bag lunch ideas. And finally, the fourth bullet that we put on there had to do with basically our award program, which most of you know we give an award or several awards every year to sustainability patriots, and so hearing your ideas, what's going on in the community, the board, as you may or not know, we have a small board, and we're a totally volunteer operation. I think there are, Diane, 7 of us that are currently serving on the board of directors. So we try to pull our best ideas together as we can, but we always are wanting to hear from our members what your ideas are, because the more hands in this, the better job we can do. So we created this program to be, put you on display. And I think I wasn't, not knowing how many people would come or how to allocate the time. I kind of thought we would go around the table, and as we normally do, and just have people introduce themselves at first. And then go, around again and give people an opportunity to talk about either these 4 bullet points or what's on their mind as we, enter a new year, a new administration, maybe enter the last chapter of the planet here. How do we, turn the page here? So I probably should say, I think most of you probably know me. I'll start, and I'm John Prespiora. I've been on the board of GreeningUSA since the beginning, when Dave Ashley twisted my arm at the Construction Specifications Institute meeting. I think I had recently been retired from the city of Syracuse, and something like, John, why don't you come and show up at our forget what we call the meeting, to get us together to start talking about what we could do to make Central New York get on the green revolution. So all these years later, I don't even know how many. Was it 14? Diane knows all those details about the history better than I do. So I'll just you can go in the order that I see you up on my screen. I see Diane is Diane, the president of the board, is next in line.
Yes, Diane Brindley. I'm sure most of you know me. And yep, there was Dave Ashley over at my workstation at Ashley McGraw Architects, twisting my arm going, hey, I'm going to form a green group. You want to belong? So that was 2003. We've been at it ever since. Howie.
Hi, I'm Howie Hollander. I have no background in all of this. I'm actually a retired systems engineer from the aerospace and defense industry. But after I retired from Lockheed Martin in 2011, I worked part-time for a couple of years supporting SUNY ESF, and I met various faces on the screen right now. So I'm more of a learner. I'm here to listen and kibitz and contribute where it makes sense, but I'm not going to be a thought leader, because I'm like in my infancy in this whole sustainability and green space. I take advantage of the fact that, you know, when you're old, you can audit classes in the SUNY system at no cost. So I try to take a course every semester at SUNY ESF, and every now and then I'll get asked by a student who tries to politely say, you know, why is an old guy like you in here? And I once jokingly answered, I spent, you know, a whole career in the defense industry essentially trying to destroy the planet. I'm curious why you have 2,000 plus students here trying to save it.
Thank you, Howie. Travis?
Hi. Hi all. I recognize Howie. I'm an educator. I'm a science educator, and I'm happy to be able to join in today. I've been increasingly interested in not just teaching science, but about teaching about sustainability to my students. I have the opportunity to teach some SUNY ESF classes to high school students. And one of the classes is called the global environment. So yeah, Howie's shaking his head there. And this year with the
Travis,
COVID shutdown, yes, Howie?
I took that class on campus with Rick Beal, and that's where that kid asked me, why are you here? And I gave that smart ass answer.
Yeah, that was a good answer. Yeah, yeah, I know Rick Beal. I was sad to see him go from ESF, but you know, I knew Charlie. I mean, I know Charlie Hall as well. You know, the originator of that course. But the global environment is really about what is true sustainability. It really looks at the human predicament through the lens of energy and systems thinking. And I've been increasingly interested in that, really taking a focus on trying to increase, like looking at the arc of, you know, fossil energy and its inevitable, relatively near term, you know, decrease in availability to human societies. And I want to be thinking what would be meaningful to me is to try to take part in community, reducing our dependence on that, increasing local, and increasing our resilience in the face of decreasing energy availability to civilization. So I'm just a teacher though, so I'm here on my lunch break, and so I'll take part as long as I can, but I really wanted to come in and see what you guys are all about and listen. So
Actually,
Yeah.
I don't want to hear just a teacher because that's like the most important profession. This is a 501c3 educational nonprofit. So that's what we're all about, is education. So thank you for educating our children.
well, I appreciate the comment, Diana. Yeah, just grateful to be able to stop in at my lunch and join the group here. But I guess what I mean is I'm like Holly was saying, I'm just learning a lot too. So happy to be here and listen. And I can't stay too much longer, but I want to be able to hear everyone speak at least. Yeah.
Yeah, well, thanks for joining us, and I agree. You know, I echo what Diane said. You know, you may or may not. Some of you know, I guess, but you probably don't know Travis. In the early days of Greening USA, we had a fairly vibrant education committee where educators from the community got together. That's something that we instigated, and it kind of fell apart over, you know, the recent years, just because of the, you know, time available for people to do that. But having an education committee with linking in with the teachers to share ideas with them was a big part of our mission early on in Greening USA's lifetime. So I hope you'll continue to stay in touch with Greening USA, and you know, maybe we can even arrange somehow to have you speak in maybe a series, maybe a mini a global sustainability series from your perspective as an educator. Might be something interesting that we could collaborate on if you are interested in doing something like that. So keep in touch. We'd like to have you as part of our regular group. Thank you. I
Thanks,
think
John.
I think next I see I think it's Dave. I think that the icons, video icons have gotten so small now I can't see the I can't see your names anymore. Maybe if I wave mine up, but I think that's Dave Coburn next.
Right. I'm David Coburn. I'm retired from the county where I was the county's environmental director for 20 years. I'm currently the vice chairman of the County Soil and Water Conservation District and listen for them at these meetings and will convey any messages that they have also. So that's me. Oh, and I did get my second COVID shot yesterday, so I'm not 100% right now.
Wow. Well, congratulations on that, and thanks for being with us again.
Yeah.
And Barry?
Here. Hi, I'm Barry Carr from Clean Communities of Central New York, and Jackie already introduced herself, but we are a 25-year-old organization. We're housed within Syracuse University, but we pay rent. So we're a tenant with Syracuse University in the Center of Excellence, and got involved with GreeningUSA and Diane when she used to be in here. She actually sat at the desk in front of me, so I would attend a lot of the luncheons running around. But what I do is we are a small nonprofit. We are one of 92 coalitions nationwide and one of 6 in New York State who get funding from the Department of Energy to do education and outreach on the use of alternative fuels and transportation. So over the years, we've watched this go from biodiesel to ethanol to natural gas to electricity to hydrogen. And now we're almost solely focused on electricity and renewable natural gas for projects. I do this as a volunteer, but I work full-time in the alternative fuels industry. So I work as a contractor, and I want to give you 2 quick examples of projects that I'm working on because they're both due today. So one's a federal opportunity where we are going to be part of a group, if we're funded, that is going to measure the true emissions of transit buses. And it'll be comparing a transit bus running on diesel, running on biodiesel, running on renewable and fossil fuel natural gas, and finally modeling and testing for emissions a full electric bus. So you might not think an electric bus would have any emissions, but the electric bus still has a diesel fired heating system on it. And they have discovered in some other studies in Europe that there's a significant amount of particulate matter that come off the tires of a transit bus, given the weight. And that particulate matter gets in people's lungs and causes asthma and lots of other things. So we're going to monitor tailpipe emissions, emissions inside the bus, and emissions at the bus stops where quite typically the buses are idling for a period of time. Everybody has been coming to us lately for information on electric vehicles, and I think it's wonderful. It's an awesome thing. I'm working for an electric livery company in New York City, but there are a lot of challenges in that. So you would think with Nissan Leafs and Teslas and all these other light duty electric vehicles that work very well, that they would fit into the taxi and Uber Lyft industry. But in major cities where people depend upon this for their travel, there's still issues. The drivers need access to fast charging because the drivers of an Uber or Lyft vehicle typically are leasing that vehicle and they live in multifamily housing. So they can't plug it in at night to charge it. So they have to be able to stop at the airport and plug in for 15 minutes or stop at a hotel and plug in for 10 minutes. And that technology has not arrived yet. A lot of the issues with that technology revolve around the existing grid. So I've been working with Con Ed, the electric utility in New York City, to help them get 2 of these chargers installed in Queens. And to give you an idea, the chargers cost $70,000 a piece. To upgrade the power to the facility to run these chargers is going to cost Con Ed about $700,000 between the cost of the transformers and trenching and bringing in the wires. The $700,000, believe it or not, is being covered by a grant through Con Ed, but it is going to take them 11 to 16 months to upgrade it. So this stuff requires an amazing amount of cooperation. And so my goal is to educate everybody so they see that this isn't simple to do, but in the long term, it's certainly the right thing to do. So,
great. Thanks for being here today and sharing that with us. And as we go around again, there may be some, might be able to give you some additional time if there's any more to tell. Bob Haley.
Sure.
You're on mute.
I was looking for it. Thanks, folks.
Yeah.
It's good to see everybody. Thank you. Yeah, I'd advocate. I'd love to hear everybody speak. And number one, I would say let's hear it for the teachers of the world. Absolutely correct. I have been fortunate enough to be a teacher at SU. During my 7 years of teaching, we were, which was quite a while ago, at the School of Architecture, we were trying to cope with the changes of the 60s. In other words, I taught through the 70s. And in the 60s, we were trying to readjust everything that was new, so-called, which dealt with the environment substantially and with teaching methodologies, the tradition of what architecture was in planning. But during that same year, it was such upheavals that it was hard to sort out the best of the 60s and take it forward. And as a result, we had 7 or 4 deanships during the 7 years I was teaching, and that ended my teaching career, since the last 6 months was the dean that then carried forward, and they were looking to bring in their own team. However, I've also been able to teach at Colgate in the arts and sciences. But with that being said, and back to your issues for our moving forward, it is about analysis of existing resources and analysis of our existing efforts. I have loved GreeningUSA from the very beginning, sitting in with Dave Ashley and Diane as well during Ashley McGraw's years, and certainly Ashley McGraw was the roots thanks to Dave's initiatives. But we're really at a much more serious time now, and we know it. However, it's not working as well as we would like it. I'm a very frustrated person, knowing probably I'm just very frustrated because when you analyze or look at the things that are going on, there's certainly not enough to take us forward on the right path. Locally, I'm really upset with the extensive amount of funding for individual planning organizations and that money, and then how little it results from that money. And I'm talking about every planning organization we have. That has to do with priorities. They're certainly not sustainable priorities in terms of the needs of the global world, or for that matter, our region, our water, our resources. They're very much trying to protect the institutions and the governments and everything else. We can't do that much longer. And I'll add more to that later as this discussion continues. But
Thanks.
I know that we know the right things to do, and we can prioritize them. However, it's the will and the leadership that's needed to prioritize our efforts so that the planning can be effective to get at those points we need to get at very quickly in the future regarding sustainable materials and life. So thank you.
Thank you, Bob. And then you've heard his name a couple times already. Dave Ashley probably needs no introduction, but if you want to say hello, Dave, and we'll be back to you in a couple of minutes. But welcome.
Okay, hello. Yeah, I'm an emeritus partner of Ashley McGraw Architects, and when I was still practicing, why I was the first U.S. GBC accredited lead accredited architect in Syracuse, and so that gave me the responsibility of teaching the LEED system. So for a number of years, I had a running class of probably 8 or 10 people, mostly architects, but occasionally a few interior designers and real estate people. Some mostly inside Ashley McGraw, but a lot of outside, training others to pass the rigorous LEED AP exam thing. So that was, now there are a lot of LEED APs, and in central New York. So that was a good thing education-wise.
Yeah,
Good job.
thanks, Dave. Yeah, you know, and just in that your introduction there made me think. You know, yeah, I haven't heard much about LEAD these days, and we should hear more about that. What kind of things they're doing, and where that had us all led to. But let's go continue our introductions here. I see MH is now. I think that's Melanie Hale. Melody, don't forget to unmute yourself, and I see you're trying.
Yes, good afternoon. Yes, hi. I just want to scoot in next to Howie Hollander as a student and am basking in the expertise here. I'm not retired, and I'm looking forward to being a better advocate when I retire. My primary focus right now is simply that I really want to make my residences more energy efficient. And so that's taking a lot of my time, but it's a pleasure to be here with all of you.
Thanks, Melanie. Are you going to be able to stay with us for a while? Or you got to get back to work.
I will have to get back to work, but not for another half hour.
Okay, great. Thanks. I know I would just want to say Melanie has been sort of looking into some things that are more esoteric, some of the materials in manufacturing, some of the chemicals that are used in society and in manufacturing these days, and trying to create some awareness, at least for our board, and to try to join in with other people across the state and taking some actions on that stuff. So I appreciate Melanie's work in that. Now, and next I see, is this, it says Judy? Am I
You're
reading
talking
that
about
right?
Jody? Do you
Yes,
mean
yes, I
Jody?
must. Jody.
Hello, everybody. I'm sorry I was a few minutes late. I missed some of the introductions, which is a pity, but that's my fault. I'm very glad to be here. I'm the Director of Sustainability Programs for DASNY, which is the Dormitory Authority, State of New York. I'm very involved with state policy on greening the work of New York State. I'm an architect and a lead AP and a well AP. I consider myself a generalist, so I'm always trying to make connections and help people see the bigger picture. And my current focuses, as there always tend to be many, are around embodied carbon and helping people understand the impact of embodied carbon, trying to get us off talking about energy efficiency without talking about behavior change and health. That's a big challenge. Also, I see that the answers to all of our problems reside in nature, and so biophilic design and an awareness of how nature heals us and how we can learn from what she already knows are paramount in my work.
Yeah, thanks, Jody. Have you have you attended Green Bag lunches before with us?
I think I've attended one. It's just, tough to scooch time out of the middle of the workday.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well,
But
when we
Diane and I know each other for a long time, and I kind of look at the website and check out the newsletters. I don't get a chance to be in these talks though.
Okay. Are you in Albany?
Mm-hmm.
Great.
Yep.
Well, thanks for joining us today. And then I see G. Is that Jeff or?
I think Glenn, your friend
Glenn.
Glenn, maybe?
Okay. Glenn, go ahead, Glenn.
So, good afternoon, everyone. Yes, my name is Glenn Allen. By trade, I'm a freelance software developer, but my green connection is that I'm an avid cyclist, year-round cyclist in Syracuse area. I am a member of the New York Bicycling Coalition, which is an advocate for cyclists and pedestrians. And I'm also a member of the CNY Adapt on the Transit Committee.
Terrific.
And we are encouraging people. We'd like to see more people get out and get on their bikes and walk and try to get away from vehicles, which is going to have a lot of benefits for everybody. So that's me. Thank you.
Well,
Okay.
thanks, Glenn, for being here. Yes, I know you were at other of our meetings, so I appreciate your participation. Eric Rogers. I think Eric's is muted. He may not even be hearing us. Eric, are you there? Well, why don't we skip? And I think I'm not sure if I've gotten everybody. I see that 12 people are theoretically on this call today. Is there anyone else that hasn't had a chance just to do a couple of words of introduction? Going once, going twice, going 3 times. Well, that's great. Now the next in this next round, what I would like to do is go around, and maybe I'll go in the reverse direction, so some of you can have a little more time to to us engage with you in a little conversation, whether you want to talk to us about the questions of looking at Greening USA and some ideas for us, or just things in general that are on your mind as we go into the new year and this new administration. So
Can I just jump in for a minute?
sure, go ahead.
What we do is put up our 12 traits of sustainable communities, because that's one of the items in the list. And I just wanted people to know what those 12 traits are. And there's lots and lots of information behind each one of these that's up on our website. So these are just the titles of the 12 traits: government leadership, local economic resilience, sustainable land use planning, sustainable transportation, water-related infrastructure, green buildings and housing, energy from non-fossil fuels, waste material management, local culture, art and entertainment, quality public education, public health and safety, and community engagement.
Yeah, thanks, Diane, for putting that up. I didn't mean to cut you off, and hopefully I didn't. Hopefully you were done. Probably to add to what Diane said is that this was one of Greening USA's sort of first and early initiatives, was to put together what we call the rating system for a sustainable community, something like the LEED rating system for buildings, which we saw that wasn't available. Since that time, things have changed. There is another rating system out there, but this still continues to be sort of Greening USA's calling card. So since it was one of the first things we did, magnitude of 10 years or something like that from the first rendition, and it could be even longer. That after we did the rating system, a few years later, we did a document which we called policies, I guess, and practices for local communities based on these 12 chapters. So we put that together. So we put this on the list as it's probably time for for this document to be taken a look at again in terms of adding some things. So you might want to structure any of your comments towards us on that, in terms of suggestions that you may have, or how we might engage with this if you're not familiar. So I was going to go back. So through the group of people, we've taken about a half an hour or so with the introductions, and so going back, maybe 5 minutes or so each, as sort of a rule of thumb, would take us about an hour, and probably get us almost to the end of our time. So maybe we need to go a little more efficiently if all of you want to speak. I know I see the chat. There's 7 in the chat. I don't even have my chat box open, but let me just turn it back. I'm going to go backwards through my list, and Glenn was talking about his involvement in bicycle transportation. So Glenn, Do you have any other ideas or concerns that you would like to share to us for the new year?
So nothing really specific, just in general that, we should try to promote alternate transportation to people, let them know that it is viable. It's something you can do. Don't be afraid to take Centro once in a while. If it's on your commute, it's, you're not going to get hurt. You know what I mean? It's all these things are safe. And it is safe to cycle if you take the proper precautions. One other thing comes to mind, and it might be out of the purview of this group, but there used to be a bicycle commuter deduction that was available, and it's been repealed. I guess this is more federal level, but I don't know if there's if there's other ways to incentivize people, like on our local level, to ditch their vehicles. That'd be something to consider. So that's my wheelhouse. Those are my 2 cents.
Yeah,
Thank you.
interesting comments. I had thought that maybe one of the things that somebody should sort of spearhead is like a day a week where it is like commute to work by bicycle or alternative transportation for everybody. I know that one of the bicycle groups I think had promoted, maybe it was a 1 day a year that they had as like commute to work day by bicycle to raise awareness of cycling. I don't know if I haven't really seen that recently, but I had always thought that maybe some kind of a program, and maybe it would require, I don't know, some funding or whatever to help launch it, that could be convince the community to 1 day a week, to select 1 day a week to take alternative transportation to get to their employment.
That's true. Traditionally, the month of May is Bike Month, and I see Howie did post it in the chat that there is a Bike to Work Day, and there's also a Bike to School Day. Both days take place in May. So yeah, maybe this group could help promote that. We've got a few months, 3 months in advance. That'd be great. Yeah, let's try to promote
Yeah.
these events.
Yeah, definitely. We can do that. I mean, we do. One of the things that you probably all get is our newsletter, which I think has about 1,500 people that it's distributed to. So we're sort of proud of that effort. So so we'd like to use that in whatever way we can. So, and then back to you, Jody. So you also put some things in the chat about trait number 8 and waste management.
New York State a long time ago stopped calling things waste, and at least in our documented items started calling them either materials or resources. So instead of saying waste management, it's material management, and it's a much more positive approach, and it reaffirms language that helps us realize that materials are valuable as opposed to waste that needs to be figured out. So that could be a really nice change to trait 8, and I think it might align with what I see as the next big chunk. Like we've gotten really good at the whole energy efficiency thing, and everyone gets renewable energy. It's not that we need to stop working on those. I'm not saying that at all, but I'm saying that the next thing that we are pretty oblivious about is embodied carbon in materials. And if we truly want to change every single sector of New York State under the new climate law and reduce our greenhouse gas emissions, then we have to start paying attention to embodied carbon. So if that material management trait actually said, that is holistic and value-based, including awareness of embodied carbon, that might start to bring that out a little more.
Can you just define a little more precisely what you mean by what is meant by embodied carbon?
Sure. We talk about basically 2 facets. there's operational carbon, which is when you use any kind of energy source like electricity or fossil fuel, and there's a carbon emissions from either the production of the electricity or the mining and burning of the fossil fuels. So the operational carbon is in running a train or operating a building. Embodied carbon is the greenhouse gas burden inherent in mining, manufacturing, and transporting a material. So if you just look at the building sector, if we continue to do things the way we are currently doing, the operational carbon is about 51% of the carbon burden in the building industry, and the embodied carbon is 49%. And we haven't started to legislate that really at all, or pay attention to it. So if we can, when we're designing a building or purchasing milk, if we can understand, how far it comes from and what the manufacturing process was and the embodied carbon in that product, then we can also start to make choices based on that piece of data.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. It could be a central focus of a whole treatise on sustainability.
Yeah, and it's
Make
really
those
something
choices.
that people, we're so because we're starting to understand energy, we're much more comfortable talking about operational energy use and moving to renewable energy. The big messy world of embodied carbon is terrifying to a lot of people. It also has the greatest ability to connect us back to nature, because if we start to use grown materials like mass timber, like wood as a structure, and other things like hempcrete, which is hemp waste and lime, then we can start to actually use our buildings to sequester carbon. They will be actual carbon sinks, and they will benefit and draw down carbon from the atmosphere. You can't do that with mined or man-made stuff like plastic.
Right. But you still have a big proportion of embodied carbon in the forestry operations and other things, unless we can get our power from electric vehicles,
yeah, that's true. But the biogenic carbon, the sequestering of carbon, is actually it can make a building a carbon positive endeavor, a carbon beneficial endeavor, rather than a carbon burdensome endeavor.
Great, thank you. I think I think that's a great suggestion, to have maybe a green bag lunch in the future to talk in depth about some of these issues. We're going to put you on the list as a speaker, possibly. So get a presentation together. Thanks for being here. Okay, fantastic. I see Melanie is still here. Maybe.
I am. I guess I just posed a question to Jody about the embodied carbon. I was wondering, I worry about the lithium batteries, it's as a resource and how that might fit in.
Yeah, I don't know enough detail, but I can tell you that the battery industry is working very hard to move away from lithium. And as far as, let's just take an example, wind turbines. I've seen the carbon calculations for wind turbines, and I would say, from what I'm reading and the research that's been done, especially in the Netherlands, which has a much longer history than we do, after 6 months of using a wind turbine, it has already paid back its embodied carbon. And that includes the mining and the manufacturing, the transportation and the assembly. So any energy produced after that is net. That's just awesome. So lithium is a horrible burden, especially with the lack of ethical practices in mining. And we're moving away from it. the key is to, while we're stuck with lithium, to make sure that every single kBTU of energy we produce is not wasted but used intentionally.
How's that for you, Melanie?
It's quite painful. I have been about it because I do have this huge, all electric vehicle that a friend of mine pointed out the lithium problem, and I am concerned about it.
Yeah, it's actually, I don't know the math for cars. I can tell you that, there are all these, you keep your old car as long as you can, but there's a burden there to the carbon emissions from the fossil fuel. You get an electric car, preferably. There's better practices with the manufacturers of those cars to take back the batteries and recycle them. That's the other aspect of the infrastructure related to electric delivery, is that there's a lot more attention to recouping the resources and then reapplying them into the manufacturing stream, which is a much better approach. Single-use, single occupancy vehicles. I'm right with anyone who bicycles as I do, and I walk everywhere as well. If we can get out of our single occupancy cars, we're all better off. But
yeah, thanks.
You need it.
Thank you.
Let's move on, if that's okay, Melanie. Dave Ashley.
Sure.
Yeah, hi, John. I've got, Jody just mentioned the word drawdown. There's a book, very, very important book that you all should have, and it's online, and the title is Drawdown, and it's a free book, but it has 100 strategies for doing exactly what she's talking about, of drawing down carbon. And so I would recommend that everybody write that down on your list and put that on your reading list, because that's a very important thing. I mean, for example, the number one thing we can do, which I know the administration is doing now, is to cut the refrigerants. You'd think that you wouldn't know where that list, but surprisingly, that's the number one thing that we can do to cut our control carbon. But to quickly, just to try to give you a list of some things, if you want to, I'd like to send some of these to you. So if you want to email me, I will send you a copy. My email address is davidcashley@gmail. davidcashley@gmail. Because I have a couple of documents. There's one here right now that's very timely, and it's a study. It's a study on, there's two major think tank groups that have done zero carbon plans, for our whole U.S. society. In other words, how are we going to get from where we are now with the use of carbon to carbon neutral in 2050? And that's a very, very elaborate thing. And there's two plans. There's two plans in here. One is called American Zero Carbon Action Plan. Its effect, and the other one is the Net Zero American. But if you just email me, I'll send you a copy of these, because those things, when you look at them and you realize that all energy use is local. We all heat our house. We all drive a car, well, at least most everybody. We have a lawnmower, we have a snowblower. We all fly an airplane occasionally. We all eat foods and support the cattle industry and all of these things. So basically all of this. And so what it is, what we can do locally, when you look at these plans, there's a vast number of things that will apply to us locally. You see, it's not the federal government doing this and the state government doing that. It's what we do, because we're the ones that use all the energy. So I recommend that everybody everybody take a look at that. And the other thing that just happened a couple weeks ago is the mayor's, maybe you saw it in the newspaper, the mayor's challenge, because they want people to submit things for ideas that there's one of the foundations that will give the city $1 million for each one of these things that gets selected to study that can be replicated for other cities. So the three things that I submitted was one of them is that our Erie Canal cities, Buffalo, Rochester, Syracuse, Utica, Rome, Schenectady, Albany, we should have a coalition of climate refuge cities, because as the climate changes, I know my daughter in California and her husband are in the process of moving from California to Reno, Nevada, because they have a HEPA filter going half the time in their house, and there's days on end when the electricity is shut off and all kinds of things with fires and smoke and all kinds of things. And other people in Miami, the sea level laps up on the streets. So anyway, that's one of the things that the mayor's challenge thing. And the other one is, which very locally is what we need to facilitate the things that you'll find in the plan, these two plans, the zero plans, is what I call a Central New York Renewable Energy Authority. In other words, an authority is a government organization that's authorized by the state that can borrow money and do all kinds of things, because like starting with education, promotion, financing, and in some cases subsidies, because think about it, we have to transition every heating system in Central New York from burning natural gas or oil. I don't think there's any coal left, although you can find some coal doors in some of the older buildings, to heat pumps, either in ground or air source or in ground. We have to transition all of those from now until 2050. And we all have to get electric vehicles. And as Barry says, we have to put in all of these level 3 charging stations, which are very expensive. But if you go to the map for charging stations in California, they're all over the place. You know, they have 10 to 1 the number of level 3 charging stations for a given area than we do. So we have a long way to go.
Yeah, and Dave, I think that's a great suggestion, and we need to figure out how to, work on that with a group or whatever. But one question comes to mind is, we have NYSERDA that has some responsibility for kind of this same thing on a statewide basis. Do you think it's possible that it might be easier to get NYSERDA to sort of create a local, locally responsive sort of sub areas that could, oversee these similar efforts, like you're suggesting, with the already existing authority, but with some focus to the various regions of the state?
Yeah, yeah, very possibly, John. That needs to be studied. That certainly is an option. But you see, I mean, the authority can be acting directly here. They can borrow money and so forth, and they can facilitate because the Biden plan is they're going to have funds available, and somebody has to be locally channeling all of those to the various businesses and institutions. How are we going to do Syracuse University, for example? You know, how are we going to transition that? I don't know.
Right. Yeah, no, it's great. Which I think this discussion kind of leads into something that Bob is up next, that Bob mentioned earlier in terms of our planning agencies. I mean, planning agencies have been stripped down to nothing. They just do some very basic perfunctory administrative processes now. Bob, what do you think about that? How can we get our planning agencies more involved in this?
Well, thank you. By the way, I've been, again, encouraged by what I'm hearing from all of you. And as I was looking at the 12 traits that Diane put up, I kind of re-looked at them in terms of your question, which is what do we do about an overall planning policy or an approach, or how do we implement? I mean, it all comes together. If we have 12 traits, what are the nature of each of the traits? Maybe they should be prioritized. And I think that's the route I'd like to go down. I made a couple notes off to the side that the number one thing that in my mind that we need, actually there's two, and I think you both mentioned, Dave has mentioned it, and Jody and probably everybody has. Local is critical. All these areas are different, even in New York State. I mean, obviously, I went on to the transportation budget hearing a month ago for New York State, and of course I was listening for bus rapid transit policies in Syracuse, which is part of our Moving People Transportation Coalition group. Sorry, another group in Syracuse trying to do biking and bus transit. But obviously that transit, for New York State Transit budget hearing was 80% of it was about New York City metro system, because that's a huge policy in itself. So local is key, but to go back to the number one, leadership, local leadership and combined leadership is critical. What I mean there is city, county together with the state should have a regional policy, and they should combine our number 1, 2, and 3, and maybe 4 government leadership as a local for our local policies with sustainable transportation, land use planning, and transportation. So the 3 would be leadership. For 2 would be local understanding of environmental demands on our region, so our policies can hit what we need to hit, and certainly. Land planning is critical. We're in the midst of some of these things, but not from a prioritized sustainable future, which is local economy, economic resolution. So I might take our first 4 as the prioritize, and even prioritize those 4 into leadership, local policy, and then dashboard with education so that everybody's understanding what sustainable planning is doing. And I'll go back to the comments that were made earlier about embedded carbon. Those can be dashboarded and they can be incentivized, such as embedded and embodied carbon can be put into dashboarding for education purposes, and it can be put into incentivizations for municipalities encouraging new developers. Perfect example, we've had Amazon come into central New York and build 2 huge projects, but we probably never negotiated sustainable policies to the degree that maybe should be done in order for the industrial grants that were given. This is the time when we have to look to the next 50 years to give those grants now based on sustainable planning and sustainable infrastructures today, and not just incentivization to get another business into a region. I'll just stop there saying that it is about, I think, number 1, a common leadership, and maybe our 12 traits, and this is just a recommendation for discussion, maybe our 12 traits should be prioritized both to be implemented and to be better understood by the public. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. I got to jump on another meeting.
Thanks, Bob. Is that Travis?
Barry.
Oh, that was Barry. I can't quite. Their icons are getting so small now. I can hardly see them here. So that was Barry that wished us goodbye, I think. So I see the next one in line sitting now next to Bob is Dave Coburn.
Yeah. Well, I don't possess the technical background that most of you have demonstrated in your comments. And so I will just offer the perspective I obtained, I guess, in 20 years of working with local government. And Dave mentioned that as consumers, we're basically all making choices about what we eat and the industries that support what we eat and how we travel, the industries that support how we travel, and all of the choices that we make as individuals that that impact these sustainability questions. And so obviously there's a lot of local education to deal with, but apart from that, it seems to me that one thing Greening USA might benefit from locally is meeting with those individuals that are involved in those industries that we perceive there needs to be changes, and finding out from those that are engaged in those activities, those industries, what they perceive to be the impediments to changing their behaviors or methods, whether it's agriculture. And I mention that because I come from the Soil and Water Conservation District, and I hear all the time the challenges that producers are facing, or whether it's maybe hospitals, who I perceive to be probably pretty substantial consumers of energy and the challenges they face. The utilities, whether it's grid or the water purveyors or the wastewater treaters. I know you've had Dareth Glantz in, and that's very helpful getting that perspective on waste management. You know, I helped, it's probably been 2 years ago now, I helped line up Randy Wolken from the Manufacturers Association to perhaps get some perspective from his membership. But I think the extent to which Greening USA can dialogue with those people who provide the services or products or whatever that we as consumers are using could be both insightful for Greening USA to understand those practical challenges or those perceptions that need changing, as well as perhaps changing their point of view or helping them understand things that they might not. And Bob Haley mentioned the importance of all of these local, the education and whatnot. I think the extent to which Greening USA can have direct dialogue and exchange with local elected officials, the county executive, the chairman of the legislature, the Association of Mayors, the Association of Supervisors. I think those kinds of dialogues could be insightful and helpful both ways. So I guess that's my 2 bits at this point.
Yeah, it's, you know, and you make a good, a valid suggestion that there needs to be all this much more dialogue with the power players in the community, and the big users of energy in the community, to figure out this kind of stuff, which kind of says to me, right now, it's kind of above the ability of us as an organization. It would require, I think, some shifting in what Green USA can do. And for example, we'd probably need $1 million grant to set up a team of effective people, and maybe, you know, get some organization of some of the other local not-for-profits that are working in this area to create some kind of independent, you know, planning agency, I guess, to create the muscle to be able to carry on those dialogues. On the other hand, I suppose that kind of approach can happen within government. And, you know, someone might say, well, our governments are kind of failing us because they're not doing their job. I mean, we need a moonshot kind of approach to this thing, and maybe our governments aren't doing enough. Obviously, they don't have the money to do this kind of stuff either. But on the other hand, somebody needs to do this kind of thing. What about governments becoming more involved, Dave? Like the county where you worked for many years.
Well, that's why I say you have to sit down and have dialogue with these folks and see where they are on these questions. I would guess that for the most part, villages, towns, and that level this isn't even on their radar in terms of dialogue. And if it is, it's something that they're not particularly supportive of necessarily.
Yeah.
But until you have dialogue with these folks and understand what it is that's driving their thought processes on these things, how do you plan for how to facilitate change with them? And so I'm not necessarily suggesting that there should be a big push to make overwhelming changes in any of these areas, so much as to enter into dialogue, and through that dialogue figure out where practical, realistic, affordable steps can be taken.
Yeah, well, thanks, Dave. I appreciate your insight into that. Let's I see Howie is sitting next to Dave.
Hello. Can I?
Welcome back, Diane.
I appreciate David's points, and their points well taken. All too often we preach to the choir, and I love seeing all of you, but I'm much more happy when I can see people that I've never seen before. We do have 2 board members right now who are currently working on outreach to business, because the business community is a community that we've neglected for quite a while. I can also point out that going way back a number of years, we started out with these green bag lunches, and we went through each of these traits. So each green bag lunch had this theme. And trait number 1, government leadership, we called in government leaders to sit down and talk about this. We have done, I don't want to go through the whole history of GreeningUSA. We have done a huge amount of outreach in the past. It's good to be reminded that we can't rest on our laurels, and we need to continue doing that kind of outreach again. And maybe we want to think about going back to our 12 traits and running back through them, and specifically looking at each one of these and having a green bag lunch on each one. We have had candidate debates. We had candidate debate for county exec way back when Joni Mahoney was first running for county exec. And she tells us famously that afterwards she said, you know, your one question that I had to answer, what are you going to do for to make the county sustainable? She said, I had to go and look that up and find out what it meant. So
she had me write the county's climate action plan. That was the offshoot, probably.
Instead of the waste treatment plant in Armory Square, we wound up with the Save the Rain program, and we didn't have a waste treatment plant. And the city of Syracuse actually went through this process and did a self-assessment on these 12 traits. And so we have all those laurels to rest on, but it's a matter of just staying the course and keeping on it. And we do have a mayoral race coming up this year, and we might be putting together another one of those where we ask the candidates, what are you going to do to make the city more sustainable? So yes, point well taken. We've done a lot in the past, and we need to remember all of the great stuff that we've done and do some more of it in the future.
Yeah, yeah. Just before we get to Howie, so just kind of maybe another question for Dave. I don't know if you know the answer. You mentioned the county's climate action plan. Do you know what happened to that? What is done with that plan? Is it something that sits on the shelf? Did it create some policies that are regularly utilized? Do you know what's going on with that?
I'm out of touch now. When I was still there, we did an annual update with targets that we were shooting for and projects that we were identifying in the various areas where we had targeted improvement. But I'm too far removed now to know what the status of that work is.
Okay. Is there an
I'm pretty sure the plan is on the website still, but I haven't looked at it myself for 5 years. So.
Okay. Who is like the county's go-to sort of like environmental planning manager?
Travis Glazer.
Travis. Okay, great. Yep, that's right. All right. Howie.
You know, when Diane started talking, I thought she was going to take my comment and run with it, but she got this close. I had exchanged some email following the GreeningUSA annual meeting with some of you on this call and several others. You know, as a new guy to this, what surprised me was every time I would come to say a GreeningUSA meeting, I'd see the same people, and that's good because obviously there are some very dedicated people, but it's bad in that it's a lot of preaching to the choir. You know, how many times we have to tell Dave Ashley that, you know, we got to be greener, you know? I mean, he invented green. But, you know, so this becomes an issue. And then kind of related to that, at the annual meeting, we give all of the local organizations an opportunity to speak. And I'm always surprised at how many small grassroots 501c3s popped out that, you know, from my perspective, seem to have overlapping missions. And there seems to be a lot of repetition. So if, for example, if everybody's going out and trying to raise money, you know, if Climate Org 1 and Sustainability Org 2 and GreeningUSA all come to me and I think they're doing the same thing, you know, I'm either going to give a much smaller amount to all three or I'm going to choose one. Maybe it's time to start looking at all of these organizations and try to pull at least some of them together into a much larger organization that could potentially have greater impact, you know, both as thought leader and community influencer, and, you know, whatever you want to call it, and can draw in new audiences to these things, you know, so that we can get that message out to a much wider audience. I took a course, audited a course, I don't want I didn't take tests or anything, but I ordered a course at DSF, let's see, it would have been in, last year. And a question was asked, you know, people had to come up with like an environmental theme story. There's a national competition for the students. And the kid behind me, you know, turned to me and said, hey, you know, what story would you write? I said, well, you know, I don't do homework. I'm not going to write any story. And she said, no, I understand that. But if you were a student, what story would you write? And it kind of, you know, I have to sit back and think about that. And, you know, the next time we had class, I gave her an answer. And my answer was, when I was a college freshman in 69, 70, that spring, we had the very first Earth Day, you know, my freshman year of college. And if you would have asked my 18-year-old self, hey, do you think we're still going to be having Earth Days 50 years from now? I would have laughed in your face. Of course not. You know, people will understand that this is, you know, something that has to be done and blah, 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 blah. Yet that kid that I was talking to was celebrating the 50th anniversary of Earth Day. And, you know, and probably has the exact same thoughts I did 50 years earlier of, well, you know, I'm going to take the lead and, you know, and I'm going to change the world. Well, you're not. You know, there was some discussion here on EVs, and I should point out my son and my daughter-in-law are very, very involved professionally and personally in this space. My daughter-in-law is deputy director of Columbia University's Earth Institute, their Earth Sciences Research Center, and is also going to be taking a senior role, a leadership role in their new School for Climate Science. Meanwhile, my son teaches sustainability courses at Columbia University as an adjunct, but also is now working full-time for a new subsidiary of Occidental Petroleum that's in the, as I understand it, kind of like the carbon management and exchange space. You know, so they walk the walk and talk the talk and have their EV, and plus, like Jody, they put the charging station in the house, and there's, you know, there's solar panels, and I get yelled at all the time, and I point out I'm going to die before I, you know, see any kind of return on any investment I make in this old house I live in, you know, so that ongoing. But anyway, with the discussion on EVs, we were in Sweden 2 years ago, or Norway, rather, 2 years, no, we were in Sweden too, but we were in Norway 2 years ago. And of course, they were on a path in 4 years, you know, in 2025, they plan not to allow the sale of gas-powered vehicles. And there was a very clever Super Bowl ad, I thought, you know, from GM, because GM now announced that 10 years after Norway, they're going to hopefully achieve the same aim. But you know, everywhere we went, there was charging stations, every public lot, every whatever. They were just all over the place. And you know, the infrastructure. My son loves his EV, but he lives in Westchester County, and it's hard for him to come up here because his car won't make it, and there aren't enough places where he could stop to, you know, top it off, if you will. You know, I think that's why he bought a car with, like, you know, 200-mile range, yet lives 250 miles away. But that's a different issue. You know, we've got a ways to go, and you know, and I'm kind of rambling here because I'm just not as smart as you guys. But there's, you know, I think the traits are the right traits at the high level. There's probably some overlap, and maybe, you know, I apologize, I forgot now who said it, but the prioritization of things and going after them with a, you know, a greater gusto. I love the fact, by the way, that trait 9 on culture, art, and entertainment, since I'm an emeritus board member of the Central New York Jazz Arts Foundation. I nominated a winner of the Sustainability Awards who's a local artist. You know, there's a lot of stuff that we can get accomplished that way. So anyway, you know, maybe I said something about you, maybe not, but that's my thoughts.
No, thank you. And your thoughts about the electrical charging stations reminds me that Ria Jazer's conference this year, if you probably saw the notices already, the energy in the 21st century is going to focus on transportation issues and electrification and those things. I was also thinking that GreeningUSA I was discussing with Dave a couple of months ago, trying to get a panel discussion on the electrification. I suppose maybe we don't need to do it since people can tune into RIA's conference, but that's important, very important topic is how do we build that electric vehicle infrastructure.
And there was an article the other day, I think it was the New York Times, that they have measured pollution in subway stations, and like the most polluted place in the world, more so than in China or India, is some of the stations of the New York City subway. I grew up in New York City. I was a commuter on the subway for many years, and so sometimes public transportation is not always the right. It is a solution to one issue while maybe causing a completely different issue.
Yeah, absolutely. The whole public health aspects that we face are immense with what comes off what we do. And I guess that's why we built the 12 traits with such broad scope to them that hopefully cover most of those aspects of living. And frankly, I think there are some important things that we include in here. For example, in the public health and safety, we address those issues in some respects, but a lot has changed since we wrote these in terms of what is effective policing, for example. And another big thing that has changed, and since we wrote these things, and maybe they fall under the government leadership, or also maybe in the community engagement area, the whole aspect of our eroding democracy, and the related issues of things such as income inequality, environmental justice, and those kinds of things. I suppose when we wrote this list, we bit off quite a bit, trying to show the interrelationship of all of these aspects. But remember, we were trying to write this as a rating system, so all of these things sort of mattered in there. I guess I'm rambling around the 12 traits, but for the most part, we're almost out of time. And I suppose we can spend a few more minutes of general discussion. If anybody, has some feedback or questions that they want to ask. Diane, did you have anything that you wanted to add to that? I kind of skipped over you, although you did jump in there ahead of Howie.
Yeah, I wanted to go back to a bigger picture that Howie mentioned, which is all of the overlapping organizations. And honestly, if the three of us, original founding members, four of us actually, Bob was in there too, if we think back to the very beginning of GreeningUSA, we immediately recognized all of the scheduling conflicts between all of the local groups are actually good news, because it means that we have a really active and vibrant community. So that's the good news. The bad news was that we were not in touch with each other, and we were scheduling things that were in conflict with each other. And that's why the newsletter was born originally. We wanted to keep everyone in touch with what everyone else was up to, so that we could glance at the newsletter and go, oh, we don't want to hold an event on that day. And at the same time, we also wanted to be kind of a convener, the group that brings other groups together, and other groups that focus on maybe one or two of these traits on the list. So just that's actually been a goal of ours from the very beginning, is to promote the good work of our like-minded organizations. And Central New York is blessed with a lot of really good advocates. And the bad news is we don't talk to each other as much as we need to. We need to stay in touch and stay, like we run into scheduling conflicts with Focus Greater Syracuse all the time. And And we have to be mindful of making sure that we're not scheduling our things conflicting with their things. So just a lot of really good stuff going on, and the point is well taken, Howie. Which is why our annual meetings have focused for the last quite a few years now on just letting those groups come together and talk to each other. And my favorite comment at the end of all those meetings is always, wow, I didn't know they were doing that. Somebody's working on that, that's great. So we'll just keep swinging on that issue.
Yeah, first of all, Diane, the efforts that you've made are terrific, and certainly our history is very impressive in impacting local leaders. You're right. I've always said that about Syracuse because I've lived here all my life. It's a place with more talented people doing individual things without knowing what everybody else is doing. And it still goes on. Right now, I'm part of 4 groups: Focus Greater Syracuse, Moving People Transportation Coalition, Landmark Preservation Board. I've probably forgotten one, but it's amazing to me when I go to these meetings how they really don't know what we collectively have just talked about here, and how much their worlds could benefit from somehow making that the crossover more efficient and more effective and more common to all. Education's a key. Local citizen engagement, which is number 12, is the key to hear what's going on and to be able to respond to it. Understanding our current uses and policies is a key, so that you can then assess, how to modify where we're going in the future. And our 12 traits are very good. It's the 12 commandments. We had trouble with that right from the beginning. We couldn't get it down to 10. Remember?
Yeah, and the annual awards meeting is very important too.
That is. You're very. Yep.
Yeah, thanks for that. And please submit names of projects or individuals, programs from the last 12 months that stand out in your mind as doing the things that we want to be seeing done in our community, so that we can give them a little bit of thanks and congratulations when we do have our annual meeting. The board has just started talking about that recently in terms of scheduling that, and also that's coming right up. So yeah, please let us know who you think in the community is deserving of recognition, because the 7 of us can't keep our eyes and ears on everything that's happening out there.
I want to nominate the collaboration platforms like GoToMeeting and Zoom and Microsoft Teams, etc., that have allowed us to carry on our work the last year.
Yeah, Howie, you raise a good point, because even though these are fantastic new capabilities, we got 9 of us on here today. We hoped for 50, and I've been on things with Focus Greater Syracuse where we had 110 signed up, and you get 48 or 50. That's good, but somehow these platforms need to be more effective. I'm sure you all have other favorite webinars. I do the Congress for New Urbanism. I do different webinars that are effective. Yet somehow it all doesn't come over to a shared knowledge. When I go to our local groups, I find some of the same people, but different people don't know how this all really fits together. I think that's the biggest, in some ways. It's like reading a paper. We all read it differently. We read for different news. How do we kind of bring up these really urgent issues of energy and global future and food and what the planet can sustain? Obviously, yeah.
And Bob, what we've seen, I didn't mention it in my introduction, but many of you know I'm very involved with the Technology Alliance of Central New York, TACNY. And, the organization is 118 years old. And if I go back in our history, we used to have presentations where 1,000 people would show up.
Yeah.
In my 25 years of involvement, we've had probably nothing larger than 200 show up. Mm-hmm. But over the last, 5-10 years, the numbers got smaller and smaller and smaller for different reasons. But if I want to have a presentation, and we're a much broader scope on all STEM fields, not just sustainability and green, et cetera. But, if I have something on fracking, I would get some number of people. Now, half of them were people like I do now, have the time and just go to everything regardless. It's more for my personal education than anything else. And it gives me an hour of the day. I don't have to, eat cookies in the house. But then the other half of the people that would show up, would come because they're interested in fracking. And, they might not show up if we had something a month later on robotics, but there would be another half of the crowd. But that crowd got smaller and smaller and smaller. And what we've noticed, well, we did two changes. Obviously, we went to Zoom as a platform, but we're also recording it and then letting people know, hey, you can find the recording afterwards.
Very fun.
Because the issue is, if I brought in fracking, and I had a local expert, too many people would say, well, it's nice that I could hear John Smith from, Syracuse University, but I could also listen to Mary Jones from University of Cambridge, and she's world renowned. And oh, by the way, I don't have to go outside and I don't have to get out of my sweatpants. That's allowed us this year to get diversify our speakers. We had people from California and Canada, who have spoken, but we're also capturing the metrics on who's looking at the recordings, and whereas the numbers are up just by doing the Zoom, because now you don't have to plan 3 hours for an hour, an hour of transportation and an hour of this, that, and the other thing for a 1 hour talk. People are more inclined to show up because they know it's an hour, period. And if they can't show up and do it, in real time, they can watch it asynchronously, without being able to participate with, online questions. So that's, it's working to our benefit.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
It's turning it around a bit, Bob, from what I'd seen the last half dozen years.
Yeah. Which webinars were those, Howie? Which webinar?
Well, we have two speaker series at TACME. Our suite lectures, and it's not sweet as in, the colloquial term, boy, that's sweet. It's named after our founding member and first president, John Edson Sweet, are geared to adults. And then we have our middle school series called the TACME Junior Cafe Scientifique. But we've had presentations of interest to this group. We had Jim Teskey from Channel 9 talk about climate change, and Thornton also from Channel 9 talked about the meteorology and forecasting and kind of making it specific to Syracuse. We had a couple of presentations on COVID. We had an interesting presentation on the brain. The suite lectures, we have one coming up, and some of you probably know Sam Edelstein. He's going to be talking about data-driven government. So if you're on our mailing list, you'll probably see that announcement next week. If you're not on our mailing list, why not? It's tiny.cc/TACNY, TACNY. I'll type it into the chat. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Glenn. So tiny.cc/TACNY, all capitalized. We're trying to make do. We also have a couple of COVID-related presentations, one on immunology, one on testing. I don't even remember what the other one was, but we've been around for a long time.
Good.
Yeah. Well, we've come to the end of our time, speaking of time, and I appreciate everybody being here. You've given GreeningUSA board a lot of food for thought and things to consider as we're going forward here. I really appreciate everyone spending their time today sharing their ideas and thoughts. I think this was very helpful to us. Diane, do you have anything else before we close the meeting?
That's great, and thanks to everyone. We're losing people rapidly, so I guess we're at the end. So thanks for.
Not everybody's retired.
Okay.
We're down to the strong 7. So thank you. Have a good weekend. We will see you next month. I didn't give you, a glimpse of next month, which might be the end of March. I think we're going to be maybe the 4th Friday in March, and we're hoping to. It's going to be a program geared somewhat to Route 81. Greg Michael of Onondaga Earth Corps has agreed to share some of the things that they've been doing with respect to air monitoring. But the discussion is, is going to center around some of those I-81 issues. And I thought of Dave when I read the section of your essay that you wrote talks about some of those local, very local issues in the I-81 project, including,
Hey, John.
sidewalks and other things. Yes, who's that?
Bob's working on that now too.
Say that again.
Bob's working on that right now too.
We're all trying to do it. Yeah, it'll be good to hear. We're all trying to keep that current, right? Because it's all going to break very quickly. You're right.
Yeah. So we scheduled that, and I'm not exactly sure exactly who the panel is going to be, but if there's an opportunity to plug either you, Bob, you or Dave, in somehow, we'll try to do that. If not, just to have you available as in the audience would be a plus, I'm sure.
Yeah. Hey, John, you had mentioned environmental justice before, and I don't know if you know Lemire Turan, who's a professor at ESF, but he teaches several courses there in environmental justice and is well published and well known in that field. So if you want to somehow tie that in, I can get you his contact info.
Yeah, if you don't mind, I think I do know him, but please send me his name and his contact info. Yeah, Lemire. Yeah. I have talked to him, and I know I have actually tried to get him to be a Greenback Lund speaker, and I wasn't successful.
If you need
about
my
a
help,
year and a half ago, before
if
COVID.
you need my help, I'm friends with Lemire. He's also on the board of the most with me, and I've taken his classes, and we've developed a friendship. I'll twist his arm if you need me to.
Okay.
And just to add to that conceptual list, or the Central New York Civil Liberties Union has also submitted a paper on environmental justice from the perspective of civil liberties, and there's an interesting gap here. And Peter King, who's also part of our Moving People's Transportation Coalition and an ESF guy, it's all about the monitoring of the environmental hazards in the neighborhoods, in the South Side neighborhoods, that has not been documented. At least the documentation has not affected the I-81 project, and the actual DOT statement is that we cannot go back and correct the environmental damage of the past because we don't have the documentation, and yet the documentation is in bits and parts, but it's not institutionalized into one entity that can then say to the DOT, you have to address this. So the Civil Liberties Union has stated that in a paper they sent to the DOT about 4 months ago now. And if the discussion goes into environmental justice as well, in the sense of legally, then the Civil Liberties Union would be very happy to come and speak on the two Lanessa Chapman. And,
yeah. I think that Greg may have. Greg may have mentioned.
Sorry, can't hear you. John.
Greg may have mentioned
John.
them as somebody
yourself,
he was
John,
going to reach out to for.
John.
For I'm sorry.
Can't hear you, John.
You can't. Oh, you're not.
Sorry.
You're not. I'm not coming out.
It's probably my speakers. I apologize.
I was going to say, I hear you fine, John.
Sorry, it was my speaker.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I was just going to say, I think that Greg Michael was going to reach out to them. His crews. They're doing some air quality monitoring as kind of a study. I guess they haven't, it's kind of in the early phases of it, although I think they've been collecting data for a couple of years now. So they wanted to share that, with us. And yeah, so, but I'll keep your comments in mind as we finalize that panel a little bit. So look forward to seeing everybody next month. Take care, be safe, keep wearing those masks.
Stay healthy, get shot.
Yeah,
Dave,
get your shots.
like it.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a good day. We'll talk to you next time.
They will.
Okay, Diane, I'm going to copy the chat, so don't turn it off yet. I just want to make sure we've got a copy of everything. I don't know if the chat